Hey guys, thanks for coming to hang out here on the sessions. A friendly reminder that you can hang out with me in more than one place because I'm also on AMP. Just download the app, come hang out with us Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just get a little more sessions in your life. We all need it. Okay, welcome to the sessions. We've got Aubrey Edwards here on the show. Just as we were queuing up, when you're like all waiting in the Zoom, waiting to get this thing up and running and giddy up, we were all shooting the shit about Taco Bell.
We
Um,
were.
I fucking love Taco Bell. I would say, hands down, it's the best of all of the fast food.
I
And
love it.
so you're a vegan, so they definitely you can
Correct.
hang
Correct.
there, right? What do you
Right.
get?
And Taco Bell was one of the first actual fast food places that actually made their stuff vegan. Like maybe not made it specific, but allowed you to tweak things to create something that was
Mm-hmm.
vegan. Like you can get a bean burrito with onions and some sauce and you're good to go. You
Great.
get two of those and you're full. And when you're a broke college kid, that's like the best thing in the world, right?
Oh my
So
God,
they've started
heaven.
adding more to their menu. Like they promote like Mexican pizzas without cheese,
Oh
and you
yeah.
can replace the beef with black beans and all these different things. And then
Shout
they've got those
out
little
to
kiosks.
Taco Bell. Yes.
Dude, it's so good. All of the other fast food companies had to play catch up, but Taco Bell's been doing it for years.
So does Taco Bell, they don't do the impossible meat, do they? Do they just do the bean substitute, which as a non-vegan, is a bean substitute better than impossible meat? Where do you stand
It's
on impossible?
it's different. Like I love Impossible because it tastes and reminds me of what beef is, but I
Okay.
haven't had any beef since like 2008.
Holy
So for me,
shit.
it's like nostalgia, right? Because I was vegetarian for like 12 years before I went vegan. So it's been a while.
Holy
Um,
moly. Wait, so
but I really
how
like
long have you been a
Impossible.
vegan then?
I've been a vegan since 2019. It was actually right
Okay.
before I started at AEW.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
I mean, not wait, it's so crazy how fast time goes. I feel like
right.
2019 was yesterday. That
There
was
was a whole
several years
pandemic
ago.
since then.
That was a long time ago. Holy shit. How hard was it transitioning from being a vegetarian into being vegan? Because that is like balls to the wall. We're in it to win it. No substitutions. How's it been?
It was really hard initially because cheese is my favorite food. And I was definitely one of those like when it's late at night, you need a snack, go to the fridge, grab a bag of cheese and just eat a handful. So like changing that whole habit was really hard.
Yeah, and fake cheese is not the same. I don't feel like fake cheese substitutes the same way.
It's better now than it was. Like there's a lot of progression that's happened in food science in the last 5 years, even. So if you ate vegan cheese 5 years ago, yeah, it was trash. But the vegan cheese nowadays, and there's certain brands that like Violife is really good because it's coconut based, so it actually melts.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
Daya is not my favorite. There's this brand Miyokos that makes like really good, like if you're doing like a charcuterie board,
Okay.
excuse me, and you need like a little bit of like cheese that would match with it. Like Miyoko's makes like really great like cheese wheels. You
Oh,
know those little baby
Borson
bell cheese
actually,
wheels?
Borson does a good little no dairy situation and it's quite
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, those little baby bell cheeses, they actually make a non-dairy version of those now. They come in like little green rubber wrappers instead of
Is
the
it the
red.
same brand or is it like
It's the same brand.
really?
Yeah, I
That's
think everybody's getting in
brilliant.
on it just because there's so much money in people doing like either meatless Mondays or people just kind of watching their health and
Sure.
whatnot. So,
I really love meat substitutes. I eat
yes,
meat. I kind of eat everything, but I like even in catering, I find our like meat substitute stuff. I'm always drawn to it. I love it.
yes, it's real good.
There's something about the texture of it or like I don't know, there's something just about it that I really love. I'm drawn to it. I don't know.
They
I
use a lot of really quality meat-based substitutes. Like my favorite, this is just like a hole on me promoting vegan brands of stuff now, but there's
It started Taco Bell, but now we're in the weeds. We're in
it
it.
it's a natural progression. It makes
Yeah.
sense. There's this brand called Gardein, and you could get it
Mm,
pretty much every grocery store in the freezer section is just a bag. And
yeah.
like their chicken strips are the absolute best. I eat them every
Really
day.
good.
And the catering at work has figured out like those brands are really good. So whenever they have like a chicken based dish, like they'll include that. Whenever they have a fish based dish, like Gardein has these awesome fish fillets. Like
Oh my
that's
gosh, it's
it's a
so
really good
good.
brand. And it's like high protein still. Like obviously there's still some carbs to it, but it's almost impossible to avoid carbs when you're vegan.
I think some of my like favorite vegan dishes. So Lita is she's a huge vegan. Anytime I would
Yeah,
be traveling with her on the road, she had introduced me to a ton of great stuff. But while I was I was never like dabbling of thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I think I was just, I don't know, I was just checking it out. But I did this butternut squash mac and
dude,
cheese,
dude.
which was so good. It was incredible. And then we went to, gosh, I'm gonna draw a blank on the name of it. Was in Brooklyn. I think that she's got like a whole brand, but it was this shiitake bacon that, and I made it at home. It blew my fucking mind. It doesn't
Mushrooms
taste like
are,
bacon, but it was just like, so good.
yeah, vegan bacon they haven't figured out yet, but you can get something that's reasonably close. That's
A
kind of
little
like a
tempeh,
smoky.
sign me
Yeah,
up.
yeah. There's a smoky vegan tempeh that I get every week. It's real good. Like
So good.
you just got to know what you
Anyways,
got to get.
well, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
So you are up and Adam. You are
Yes,
in Seattle. Of course, we know that you are West Coast, Pacific Standard Time. And we're doing this at 10:30 Eastern time. So it is like early rising for you. You like to get shit done early.
I've always been a morning person. I think part of that came from I worked like office jobs before
Mhm.
this, so 9 to 5. Like you're getting up early, you're getting ready, you're driving to work, busing to work, whatever it may be, and then you have to be productive by 9 a.m. And a lot of cases, because I was working management roles, I would try to get to work before other people so that I could get a handle on my day before everyone else came in and just kind of blew off wherever I was going and just like, okay, now I have to worry about this stuff. So I've always been a morning person, and my husband still works in games, so he has to be up early. So
Mm.
kind of just makes sense. And working for an East Coast based company, like I was telling you when we scheduled this, you're like, are you sure 7:30 is fine?
I
I'm
know.
like,
I was like, I checked you like 10 times. I'm like, you're positive this is okay?
I'm normally recording unrestricted at 7 a.m. So this was
Mm,
nice because I had like an extra half hour to like
little
fully get
breather.
ready. I'm on my second cup of coffee rather than my first. You're getting a good version of Aubrey.
Hell yes. Yeah, I'm deep in the coffee throes right now. I'm just like, Nora was sick all weekend, so I'm like kind of
Oh,
white
sorry.
knuckling and I'm like, what's happening? But the coffee, it's helping. Management roles, that's always been a thing
Yes,
for you. So for you to step into AEW, rattle off what all of the roles are that you do. We see you obviously in front of the camera. We see you,
hmm
in the matches, refereeing. What else do you do? You wear a lot of fucking hats.
I
I do
do wear
not
a
mean
lot
to
of hats.
swear there. Sorry.
Can we swear? I'll try and
Yeah.
hold back a little bit. Okay. So yeah, I do a lot of stuff at AEW. My formal title is I'm senior project manager, and that sounds very singular, but I obviously have a lot of projects I manage.
What kind
A
of
big
projects? What are the projects?
projects are ranging from just like game stuff to heel stuff to whatever else may come up. So as I mentioned, I'm co-host for AEW Unrestricted official podcast, new episodes
Shout
every
out.
Thursday. Yep. On all of your favorite podcast platforms. I host that with Tony Schiavone. We've been doing that since like late 2019. So pre-pandemic, we've been doing that. And then that's kind of what I started with when I was working the office contract side stuff. And then someone got a hold of my resume at one point and went, wait, she worked on games for like 10 years? I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm working in AEW Games, which is our games sort of umbrella. And I'm working on a number of games for them right now that I can't quite talk about yet.
Oh,
Yes. We're always working on stuff. Like people don't know about games until they get announced, but it's like you're working on games for years before then. Like it's just a constant thing. And then I run AEW Heels, which is our female forward fan club. So we've been building sort of a community of women and female identifying wrestling fans that can come together and share in their love of wrestling, but also create these friendships that kind of are difficult to form in wrestling
sure.
because you don't have a lot of other women that you can enjoy this thing with, and there's so much gatekeeping with like, oh, you're a wrestling fan, well, who won the main event of 18
Let me quiz you real quick.
1985 in
Prove
whatever
it.
pay-per-view, blah blah blah. And if you don't prove it, then you suddenly feel like you don't belong, and that's how a lot of
Yes.
women fall out of it.
Yes.
So
What
we've
is
been sort
that?
of
It's so stupid. But it's
I don't
not even
know,
just
it's
wrestling.
annoying.
That's in many different like categories where
It's in
like,
comic books, it's in video games, it's
yes.
everything that was traditionally male dominated as
Yeah.
hobbies. But yeah, so
Yes.
we've been building that. And then I just do random projects that come up. So my real boring example that sounds super impressive is recently Chris Peck, who does a lot of like legal stuff for AEW.
Hmm.
He's been building our digital privacy policy, which has to be GDPR compliant. So we have to account for like certain rules in the UK that factor in like 12-year-olds and how much information we're potentially saving. Yeah. So it's
Oh
a
my
lot of just like,
gosh.
yeah. And it's like I have experience in this stuff because I've released products in other countries and you have all these regulations that you have to follow. So yeah, I kind of just
That's
do
crazy.
whatever.
Because it's, you know what? It's really always kind of funny to me. I mean, I feel like wrestling is this in general, where it's like, oh, this person does this thing, but then they also do a million other things. Like Bryce is out booking my travel. I'm like, how do you have
Yep.
time for that? Like,
Yeah.
your job as a referee is already time consuming in
Yes.
terms of like what a show day looks like, getting ready for matches, talking to talent, going through hair and makeup. You have a million different things to worry about, but then once you hang up that hat, you pop on another one and then it's off to the races with that. My question is, I don't even know if you can answer this. Does your contract like
So I have two contracts. I
okay.
have the talent contract, which looks a lot like any other talent contract, and I make that paycheck through that.
Yeah.
And then I have an office contract, which is a completely separate paycheck
Okay, so
that
mine's the
is
same actually. But
right.
I
It's
don't
sort of
do
like
as much as you. You do a lot more.
I'm a workaholic, and I've come to terms with that phrase. I'm just kind of like, yeah, no, I just work all the time. I like being busy. I like doing things, and I've always been a type of person that I want to help the companies that employ me. And
Mhm.
especially being a part of AEW since the beginning, my big thing was I want to do whatever I can to help this company be successful because this is a pretty dope job. I want to have
Yeah.
it forever if I
Yeah.
can. So I know that there's more than just the television product we have on TV in order to make a company successful. So whatever I can do to help.
Okay, I've got several follow-ups. First one, going back to the video game. So
Yeah.
we've all been kind of waiting with bated breath. We hear about the video game. I know Kenny Omega had just recently been talking as well about the video game and what the rating is. Can you break down what the rating is and how that affects things in terms of its release and the level of goriness, all of those things? And is my
Sure.
husband at fault for that?
Only slightly. So I will clarify. I'm not actually working on Fight Forever, the console
Okay.
game. I'm working on
Okay.
other stuff.
Okay.
Fight Forever is sort of Kenny's baby, so he's been doing that. I've been on other stuff the whole time.
Okay.
But everyone assumes I'm working on it because I'm the video game person. So it's
Yeah.
yeah. But to answer your question about ratings, so there's this company in games called the ESRB, the Electronic Software Ratings Board, and they have a rating that they assign to every single game. And there's generally different levels like E for everyone and T for teen and M for mature. So you end up hearing stories about like Grand Theft Auto is mature, and then they had all these other things in it that come to light. So how your game is rated affects how it will do in other markets. So you have things like a very traditional example is Mortal Kombat. Like Mortal Kombat had a lot of blood when it first came out, and that upset a lot of people, specifically in the UK, because Germany had a lot of restrictions on how much blood you could have in a game. So they ended up changing the color of the blood to blue, and it just like blue sweat. So they could get around sort of the ratings and the restrictions there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a lot of ratings is similar to how it works on TV. So if you have any sort of swearing, that changes the rating. If you have any sort of gore, that changes the rating. Is the violence actual violence, or is it comic violence? Like, is there shooting in the game? There's all these different things that play into what the rating of your game is, and it just affects so much from there.
Interesting. It would be crazy to be on the board for something like that, kind of deciding what to go, what's because I'm sure a lot of stuff falls in like a bit of a gray area in terms of like
Yes.
really putting it through that sieve and figuring it all out. Okay. Well, that's one question answered for me. Heels.
Yes.
How did the concept of heels come together? And I think, yeah, I just want to talk more about the female relationships that exist both in wrestling, like in the locker room, but also just with fans. But let's just start with the origin story of putting heels together.
So Heels was originally created by Brandy Rhodes,
Mhm.
and it came out during the pandemic, which was a really, I mean, for all of us, it was a time where we needed to make connections because we weren't physically in the same space. So it was sort of this idea of we're going to have monthly Zoom sessions where the community gets on and we present content that is not accessible but AEW related. So we would have talent on to do Q&As. We would bring external partners that were adjacent to AEW. Like we've had this one group, Self Care is for Everyone. It creates those awesome t-shirts with the self-care sayings. Like
Yeah.
they do a lot for mental health. So we brought them on a couple times to talk about like managing your self-care and how you talk to yourself and positivity and all those sort of things. And the group that Brandy had created, like the idea was really good. It was, let's create a group of women that can come together that enjoy wrestling. But when you have someone who is running an organization and it's one person, it's sort of in their idea. So a lot of it was very much what Brandy Rhodes wants to do. So there was a lot of like makeup tutorials, there was a lot of fashion type stuff, which there's no fault there. There are so many things that like women care about makeup and fashion. I love makeup. I don't wear it 6 days a week, but that one day
No,
a
but
week
when
I
you
wear
do,
it.
you crank out a look.
I go extra.
Yeah.
I don't hesitate to go
I love
extra.
it. I love it.
Yes. So when Brandy left, there was sort of a hole of who is taking this over. And Leva was already doing a lot of the work behind the scenes and she was helping Brandy with stuff. And I was starting to get more involved with heels. So it sort of became like, without even discussing it, it's like, okay, well, Aubrey and Leva are taking it over. And there was so much work to do that we're like, how can we build a larger sort of leadership group to take this on? So we've incorporated Amanda Huber, who does a lot of work with community, since there's a lot of overlap with what Heels does versus what community does.
Yeah.
And Vicky Guerrero, because she's always cared about this kind of stuff. So the four of us are sort of running this group of what are our monthly events. We have a website where we're managing a community. We have in-person events at every pay-per-view. We're trying to create unique content for them. So it's a lot like what you would see with someone's individual Patreon, where someone's paying a subscription to get this content that's unique and behind the scenes. But instead, we're building this community behind it. So every day, like I log in and there's just tons of posts of people sharing the things that are happening with their life, things that they really enjoyed on Dynamite this week, and all of that stuff. And it's just been super, super great to see it grow. And we've had crazy, crazy growth. I think we've grown like 300% in the last year.
Oh, wow. Hell yeah. How do you find the conversation sort of changes when talking about wrestling in a community that is curated for women? What does that look like? If it's not, and I'm not like, you mentioned doing the hair, the makeup tutorials, the fashion stuff, but kind of moving away from that. What do the conversations look like now?
I think a lot of the conversations come down to who people are watching wrestling with. Like women are primarily the caregivers in their homes, so their kids are getting into wrestling. They're enjoying wrestling with their spouses or partners. But on top of that, they're looking more at, I see a trend of people looking at the characters or people's looking at the growth. Like there's a huge support for a women's division. Everyone's been looking at like how great Ruby's gotten in the last few months, how awesome Willow is, like all of these women who came into AEW sort of later that are just propelling themselves and being awesome on TV. I find also that there's a lot of just positivity and inclusion. So if someone's having a bad day or whatever, they'll post about it and then everyone else comes up like, no, you're fine, you got this, you're a badass, whatever. And just a lot of affirmations that are really good to help build the community. And I see that a lot more in this space than I do on somewhere like Twitter. Right. And I think part of that is just because it's curated and it's people who actually care about building the community, because we're asking people to spend money. They obviously want the best out of it. So a lot of it is like the community is just managing itself and like, no, this is what we do here. We're very inclusive. We care about everybody. Like we have people who are trying to become pregnant and are running into IVF issues.
Holy
we have
shit.
people who are in the process of transitioning. We have people who have kids who are in the process of transitioning.
Yeah.
So it's like all of these things that are super unique that we go through day to day that we all need support with.
Wow.
Right. But we all care about wrestling. Like that's sort of the thing that brings us together, but we don't shy away from the things that make us unique.
I love that. That's really, really cool, especially during times of all those things you rattle off where it's like, oh my God, I need to talk to somebody. These people have become my people. There's also, I'm sure, something kind of nice about having a little bit of that veil of anonymity while you're on there to speak freely, to have those conversations. That's really, really cool that you guys have put that together. Okay. So you talk about, what it's like in that heels community for women in that space. Now, for you, as the only female referee in AEW and the career that you've been able to carve out for yourself, How did this all come about? Like, I first met you at the Mae Young Classic when you were
Yes.
coming into ref, and I was like, wait, trying to get notes and like all this stuff to put
Right.
together for me and Beth calling those matches with Michael Cole. But where does wrestling come into your life? I mean, you talk about working in gaming and working in all these other different jobs. How did wrestling become the thing for you?
So I never watched wrestling growing up, and that's a very like I think everyone watched wrestling growing up and then fell out of it and then got back into it or whatever. Like it was not a thing in my household. My dad said it was stupid and it was fake and we should never watch it. So I never grew up with that. I always grew up with video games. I was, as you can probably tell, I was a straight A student. I've always sort of been that person. I was a ballerina. I was into all of these other things. So it was after I graduated college, there was a WrestleMania, I think it was 27, where The Rock and Stone Cold were coming back. And all of my friends, who I have a lot of dude friends because of video games, they had all watched wrestling as kids and had fallen out of it. And this was the thing that got them back into it. They're like, oh, Rock and Stone Cold are coming back. We got to watch this thing. And so we treated it like the Super Bowl where everyone brings over something. We had like a box pool, like we're trying to figure all this out. And I literally have no idea what's happening. Like I'm Googling why the streak for The Undertaker is such an important thing. Because I'm like, isn't it predetermined? Like, why is a streak a big deal? So there was a lot of things I didn't know. And I just sort of like got into it from there. And as you're watching every week, you start of understanding like the process and the storylines, and you get attached to the characters. And that was right around the time that Bryan Danielson was like on his ascension.
Yeah.
So I really connected with him. And then as you're Googling Daniel Bryan, you're finding all of these like, oh, what's Ring of Honor?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
what are independent, like, what is independent wrestling? Like, this is insane. There's this whole world that's opened up. So I started like traveling the country to watch wrestling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I went deep into it. I go 100% in everything I do. There's a trend here. So I got really, really into it. But I had never thought this was going to be something that I did.
Right.
I was very content in my career. I was very content with ballet. I was content with everything else I was doing. And then we were at an indie show in Seattle, and they had announced during like intermission that they were opening a school and we're going to start training. And my husband just looks at me and goes, I need to do this or I'm going to regret it the rest of my life. I'm
Oh
like, oh,
shit.
okay, cool, great. Well, you go do that. I'll be a supportive wife. I'll go to your shows. It'll be great. And that's literally what we did for a year and a half, is that he started wrestling. He was doing his gimmick, all that kind of stuff. And right around the time that I turned 30, I left dance for a number of reasons. And I was looking for something else to fill that time.
Yeah.
And I've always loved performing. And because I'm already going to this show every 2 weeks, I have relationships with these people backstage. They know me. So the head ref at this indie was like, have you ever thought about reffing? I'm like, no, why would I do that? That seems silly. Don't you just stand there and yell rules at people? He's like, you should try it. I think you'll like it. I tried it. I was terrible. I went in my car and cried after. I'm like, this is so dumb. I don't understand.
Love a good car cry. There's nothing like a
Right?
good car cry.
It's so just thrilling. I love it. But then I tried it again, tried it a third time, really liked it. They put me on a show 2 weeks later. By the end of the year, I was doing indies in Canada and Oregon. And then within the first year of me reffing, I was doing tryouts at NXT.
Crazy. It's so funny to me how like one thing just leads to another, and like now here you are. Like it sounds very simplistic to say it like that, but like it always just blows
Yes.
my mind. I love hearing people's stories like that of just like you follow a path down one way. I mean, even for me getting into wrestling, like it wasn't the thing that I sought out, but all of a sudden I'm like in it and I'm like, wait, I love this. This is great. And you just like, yeah, you go all in, fully commit, and now here we are.
Yep.
Okay, so you're in it. Now you get to referee Bryan Danielson matches.
Oh my God, how wild.
Okay, so you have seen your fair share of some like gnarly shit in the ring.
Yes, I've worked with your husband.
Yeah, yes. Are there moments that you're going, ooh, I don't know, do I got to throw the X up? Like when you're in those moments and it's just so gruesome and there's so many different things happening, how do you kind of evaluate that during that moment when there's lights, there's cameras, people are yelling, there's so much shit going on? How do you focus on that?
People are yelling in your ear because you're getting
Yeah.
time cues and all this stuff. So there's like, you're trying to just maintain this sense of calm
Yeah.
and focus. And I think honestly, that's like the big thing when it comes to being a ref on TV is having that calmness that goes with it. So like, for instance, recently there was the girls match where like Ruby's got that giant crimson mask, right? So in the middle of the match, she's kind of, she doesn't know how much she's bleeding, but she sees the blood dripping onto the mat, and she's like, "Am I okay?" I'm like, "Dude, you look so good right now." Like, I'm just trying to like pump her up. I'm like, just wipe it off your eyes, don't wipe it off your face. It looks good. But there's like a certain level of blood where you have to start being concerned, right? And she
Sure.
wasn't there. But you also have Dr. Sampson ringside. So he's there to sort of
Are
like,
you
if you were to
kind of
come in,
gauging him? Like you're kind of giving him the eyes every once in a while to be like, are we cool?
yeah, because there's a lot of things that like I'll see that he won't see. So like if there's a
Sure.
dive to the outside opposite stage, like he may not actually see how that collision happens. So I give him a quick cue of no, they're all okay. So he's watching intently, and then I have a way to communicate to him if anything were to like seriously go wrong. But there's an intensity and a gruesomeness that is okay. So like I've pulled barbed wire out of Eddie Kingston's body when they did that like barbed wire everywhere match.
Been there,
So
girlfriend. Been
oh
there.
my God. Yeah, where you're just like, okay, he literally can't move because he's barbed wired to a board right now. And I have to
Oh
like
my
pull this out
God.
of him on TV. But you can't freak out. The moment you freak out, everyone else freaks out.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that from management. Like when everyone's worried about project deadlines and everyone's worried about how we're going to get these things done, if you're sort of like, oh man, I don't know what's going on, like everyone else freaks out because you don't believe in it, right? So you have to remain that sense of calm in this chaos so that everyone can kind of stay cool and just focus on their thing, which is telling a story.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
are instances where people do get injured. It's really unfortunate, but we've seen it happen. Like even when people do moves thousands and thousands of times, sometimes it just
Sure.
doesn't go right.
Yep.
Gravity is a cruel bitch. Um, but like when those situations happen, you just kind of have to be on top of it and understand like someone's going through something right now. We need to just remain calm. We need to come in, figure out how bad it is. And if the match needs to stop, the match needs to stop. That's what
Yeah.
they do in pro sports. Like when
Yeah.
there's a concussion in football, you just stop the play, they go to commercial. And that's what we should be doing because every injury we have is important and is critical for us to figure out how bad it is and to address it as quickly as possible.
What is your reaction to the criticism that you had received, I guess, in terms of like becoming like a bigger character? We always think of
Mm-hmm.
refs being in the background, you're not really supposed to notice them, and that has not been what your career has been.
No.
So what was your reaction to that initially when that started happening?
I think when it first started happening, it was obviously something that I'm just like, oh, Twitter eventually is going to hate me because I'm a woman. So that's going to just happen. And I'm really good about not listening to criticism that doesn't matter. I listen to constructive criticism.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I've been focused. Like if Jericho is putting me in a match and he's shoving me and then wants me to shove him back, I'm going to do it
Yeah.
because it's ultimately not my decision. It's his decision because it's his story. And I'm there to help elevate the story that he's telling. So it's not like I tried to be a character. It was just sort of like they figured out that I have a very go-getter personality and very no nonsense. And as people picked me in matches, they're like, "Oh, well, if I shove her, I get a lot of heat for that. So let's do that. Cool, great." And it just sort of happened naturally. But it was never something I intended. It was just something that happened because the wrestlers asked me to do things in matches and I do them.
Have there ever been moments of like other refs giving you shit of like, because you are your own character, like you really do have your own spotlight. Is there ever like any animosity amongst referees for that?
I mean, I get none at AEW because all of the guys are freaking great. Like
Yeah.
they're just all absolutely incredible. But I will hear some criticism online from other referees that are like on the indies and stuff. And I'm like, dude, why are you criticizing people on TV? Don't you want a job? It just
Yeah,
doesn't
calm it
like
down.
I don't focus on the criticism. I just focus on how silly people are. They're like, why are you criticizing something online if you're then shooting me a DM about getting a job at AEW?
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we're not gonna do that. You just shit all over me.
Yeah, the moment has passed.
Yeah.
You are obviously a perfectionist.
Yes.
Stress yourself out. How do you manage perfectionism? I feel like I can struggle with it sometimes too. I don't know if it's like my Virgo tendencies kick in that like I didn't realize I was a perfectionist. I think until a little bit later in life, and now I'm like, holy fuck, loosen up. How do you manage that?
I manage it by knowing that I'm not always in control of everything. So it's hard to strive for perfection when you are not 100% the person that leads to the end goal. Like, as I said, wrestlers are the ones who are telling the story. There's only so much I can do in a match. There's an ability where I can say, okay, well, my performance was really good there, but I could have done these things different. And I feel like you don't have complete control over that because so many other things are happening. Like if the match didn't necessarily go so well, I'm going to feel that. I don't really feel like I can hit perfection because the match wasn't perfect.
Right.
But even then, I think perfection is unobtainable. And once I realized that, now I'm just focused on progress. That how can I be better? How can I improve what I'm doing? How can I be better at my craft? How can I make an impact at this company and in wrestling and be the best version of myself? Because perfection is just, if you try to chase that, you're just going to constantly be disappointed.
Whew, honestly, it's funny. I would always think, I don't know, I'm pretty like laid back. I don't think I'm that personality. And now I'm like, oh my God, bitch, you are. That is
You
you.
are that
Like,
person.
I constantly am like, I try to do everything. I
Yep.
really try to do everything. And I try to do it to like the highest degree. And sometimes I'm just like, yeah, you got to like pick and choose those moments of like when you can just kind of like sit on your heels a little bit. No
Yep.
pun intended. Um, Talk to me about the ballet life. You did it
Oh
for a
man.
very long time. I remember you posted not all that long ago about like missing it and posting like a video of you as a ballerina, but for doing
Mhm.
it for so long and then deciding to walk away from it. Why did you decide to walk away from it?
So I did classical ballet for 22 years. Yeah, right.
That's your life. That's your
I
life.
I still am at the point where I danced longer in my life than I didn't dance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy to think that it was such a huge part of my life and I've just sort of dropped it and walked away. I had aspirations when I was younger, like around high school age, to become a professional dancer. But ballet at the time, it sort of changed a lot now, but at the time, ballet was still very traditional. You had to look a certain way, you had to be a certain size in order to be successful. And I was strictly doing classical ballet. Like if you do hip hop, you do lyrical, you do contemporary, there's a lot more opportunities for dance in different media forms. But if you're strictly looking at like ABT or New York City Ballet or any sort of city based ballet program, you're going to be looking for classical ballet. And part of the problem is I was too tall and I was too curvy. So there was no way I was going to hit that role. And it seems so silly to say because I'm 5'7", but part of the problem is when I'm in point shoes, I'm 5'10". So very classical choreography requires the guy to be taller than you so that he can like do the things like twirl you and dip you and all those fun things. And if the guy's not taller than 5'10", then I'm screwed. And if the guys are, say, my height, then the classic choreography doesn't work anymore. So I became very limited in what I could do. So right around the time I was graduating high school and I'm looking for something to do, I'm like, well, ballet's cool and all. I'm going to have a really hard time with it. My career is only going to last till I'm like late 30s potentially. There's only so much money. I need a backup plan. And that's why I went into video games. But I kept dancing my whole life just because it was something that I loved. Right around the time I was, I think, late 20s, I created a nonprofit with a bunch of other dancers. And we work to make dancing more accessible to communities of who didn't have access to it because dance is very expensive. You need to have access to classes. If you don't have a way to drive to classes, when you're rehearsing for a play or really anything, there's performance fees. You have to buy your costume. You have to buy your makeup. Your parents need to buy tickets. There's all of these costs that come with it. And people who maybe don't come from privileged backgrounds don't have access to that art. So we would do performances and we would do classes with local organizations. And one of the groups we worked with was the Boys and Girls Club. So we would go, we teach classes for free. We give them a routine. We bought them costumes. We put them on stage. We gave their parents as many tickets as they wanted. And we basically gave them the entire experience from beginning to end without spending a dime. And that was
Wow.
sort of the thing that we did. The problem with that is that the artistic director was an emotionally abusive asshole.
Great. We
And
love those.
yeah, awesome.
You're getting the
So
full ballet experience, everybody.
100%. Oh, an artistic director is mean to you? Welcome to ballet.
This is
So that
what
was
you
sort of
wanted.
that was the thing that killed it for me. It was, I'm doing this wonderful thing, giving back to my community, giving back to dance, doing it in a way that makes me feel good. Why do I feel like shit and I'm crying on the phone with this guy every 3 months? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And honestly, like from that point, the video I posted on Instagram was like the last show I did. After that, I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Like,
How hard was it for you to come to that conclusion and to like hang up those slippers for the last time?
it was really hard. There was a number of other girls in the group as well who were sort of feeling the same way I was. So it was a lot of late nights talking about things, doing a couple shots, trying to figure out like what we were going to do about it. So I wasn't the only one that walked away. There was a few of us. And I think that made it a lot easier because it wasn't just me. Like, it wasn't me questioning, am I reading this situation the right way? It was other
Yeah.
people feeling it the same way. And I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit better about walking away because this is exactly how I read it. So I just need to go.
Fair enough. And you know what? I think once your like mind and body have both kind of landed on that conclusion, it's like it's done at that point. But when you
On
like
top of that, I'm also 30 and ballet is rough on your body. So,
sure.
and I'm just like, my feet don't look right. I'm sore all the time. I'm not making any money doing this. Like,
What's the bunion situation?
oh, I've got him. I've got him in spades.
I asked that because I grew up, I played ringette my whole life, which is like hockey. So I wore skates always. My feet are trashed.
I always
I
tell
had
people I
bunion
earned
surgery
those
at
bunions.
I have one left. I had surgery on my left foot when I was probably like 16 or 17. Had it. I wish I did both at the same time because now it's just the other one is it's horrible. They suck and it hurts. It's so
Oh yeah.
Does it kill you on a plane when you get off a plane? Or your feet like
Not really. I think my whole body hurts when I get off a plane because I'm on a plane for hours.
okay, how okay, so you've stayed in Seattle. What I
Correct.
mean, it's where you're from. You love it. We'll get into all of those things, but travel from Seattle every
Yes.
week is grueling. How do
Yes.
you cope with this?
So all of those things I do at AEW, heels and games and all that, requires a lot of email and follow-up. So I spend my time on planes doing all of that work. So
Oof.
Mondays, for instance, I have anywhere between 4 and 6 meetings. So Tuesdays, when I'm traveling for multiple hours, I'm just following up with all of that stuff. So if action items come out of a meeting, I'm probably going to wait until tomorrow to do it. And then as I'm sitting on this 4.5 hour flight, to go somewhere, like, okay, cool, I'll answer email then. So it's one of those, I just stay focused on things and you don't necessarily notice the flight. I actually had a hard time when we, earlier this year, like after the Seattle show, we did a couple West Coast shows and the flights are so short for me. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Like I had a direct flight to Fresno. Nobody else had a direct flight to Fresno. Some
Fresno
people had to take
screwed
like
me.
two
It took me
layovers.
forever to
Oh my
get home from
God.
Fresno.
Oh my God. Yeah, I had a direct flight to Fresno, which was like an hour and a half. So for me, I actually got really behind on work that week because I've come to the like my habit is now, okay, I put it off everything till Tuesday. I do it there, and I'm just not as productive in hotel rooms as I
Yeah,
am on planes.
fair enough. Would you ever leave Seattle?
Um, I don't know if I would. I moved up here for college. I've been here for almost 18 years
Wait,
now.
where did you grow up? I thought you grew up there,
Northern
no?
Northern California.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought
So
you were
kind of
like
like,
Seattle tried, tested, and true.
no, if you actually look at my phone, my area code is not a Seattle area code.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I grew up there. I moved up to Seattle for college. It's where I met my husband. All of my friends, like I'm still really, really close to. They were all my college roommates. I'm seeing their kids grow up now. So
Yeah.
like I'm Aunt Brittany to them. Like they one of them actually just learned that I'm not actually related to her. She's like, wait, what? It was like, even though like we go on Thanksgiving vacations together, she just assumed like I was actually her aunt. And I'm like, no.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah, it was real adorable. And I'm like, oh, this is so cute and
I'm
precious.
sorry. Oh my gosh, sweet little thing. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I just had something I was gonna ask you and I just drew a blank on it. What was it? Something about being in Seattle, not being in Seattle, moving.
Oh, would I ever move?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I would. Like, I think that was part of the problem with, like, when I was doing all the NXT tryouts, there's always the idea of like, what if they pick me?
Yeah.
What if I get this job? Okay, I guess I have to pick up and move to Orlando. And I would have done it, but I don't really like Orlando. I know a lot of people do, but it's way too humid. I don't like constant heat. I grew up in California and I moved away, so that should tell you something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I hear you on
but it's
that.
one of those, like, if that's what I need to do to be successful, then I'll do it. But AEW has just afforded me the opportunity of, you can stay where you are, you can live where you want to live, and we'll fly you wherever. So I've kind of accepted that if I want to live here, I have to take long flights. Part of that, though, is like I book my flights way in advance just so I can try and save the company as much money as possible.
Sure. Sure.
Stuff like that. But like if Tony tomorrow said, "Hey, I need you to move to Jacksonville," like I'd do it in a heartbeat
Yeah.
because I love this job.
Yeah. What about your husband?
I mean, he really likes Seattle. Part of it too is like he works in games still.
Yeah. So
That's
that's
we
like a
we
kind of a hub to be in, right?
right. That's why I came to college here. There's a college in Redmond, which is where Microsoft is headquartered, called DigiPen Institute of Technology, and they're an undergrad program that actually teaches you how to make video games. So a normal college degree is, say, 120 credits. My bachelor's in computer science was 154. So it is
Oh.
heavily accelerated. There's a lot of math and physics. My electives are like string theory and
The fuck is string
statistics.
theory? I don't even know what that
It,
is.
it's a physics thing. I'm not going to go into it.
No, let's not. This will go downhill very quickly. It'll just be a lot of
This will be a
nods and
very boring
grunts.
podcast. People are
Not a
going to tune
clue.
out.
Not a
This is
clue.
not what I want. But yeah,
Um,
so we met there. And part of that is like, you come here for the work, similar to how a lot of people move to Orlando to become wrestlers. Like, this is where that industry is. So he's working on stuff, and where his future is here. Part of the advantage, though, is since the pandemic happened, there's just so many more opportunities for remote work
yeah,
that I feel like it wouldn't be disruptive if we had to move. It would just suck.
sure. But I love a good little adventure too. There's something very fun about that, about like
There is.
moving to a new place, checking things out. Okay, you've been married. You've been how long have you been married? You've been together
We've
17
been
years.
married. I'd actually be like 13 years next month.
Holy moly. How do
Yeah.
you guys do it? What's the secret to marriage success for you guys?
I think part of it is we're the same person. Like, we're both super driven and we're both super competitive. So it just makes sense when I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing." He's like, "Okay, cool. How do I help?" And we've just been very supportive in the things that we want to do. Like I said, when he's like, "Oh, I want to try wrestling." Cool, great. I'm going to be a supportive wife because that's what you need. There was
Yeah.
no question, or there's no asking permission. It's, I'm going to do this thing. Cool. I'm going to support you because you clearly have an interest in that.
Yeah.
So when I got my AEW contract, it was like, "Hey, I think I'm going to do this thing." He's like, "Cool. Just let me know how much money you're making now so I can update the budget." And that's it. That was literally it. So part of it is there's communication is a really big one, right? Like, they
Oh
always
yeah.
say cliche, like, communication's huge and all that stuff. I'm obviously a very schedule based person. If you looked at my calendar today, it'd be disgusting. But part of that too is scheduling time with your partner
Yeah.
and making sure that you're taking time together. So Saturday we hung out, we drove out to, the boonies somewhere. We watched like Emperor's New Groove in the car, like just stupid stuff. But it's one of those, like, spending time in the same space where we're
Yeah.
not talking about work. That stuff's really important for maintaining a relationship.
Certainly. I always harp on the communication, but it's true. If you're not able to communicate, not able to talk, work things out. I mean, I'm constantly like, I probably drive John crazy. I'm like, what's happened with this? Let's talk about this thing. He's like, "Okay, can you just give me a second? Can you give me a second?" But 17 years together, that's very impressive.
Yeah,
13 years married. Hats
yeah.
off.
Thank you.
Hats off to you. That NXT experience, what was that tryout experience like for you? What do they put you through for a tryout like that versus what kind of happened with AEW?
It was terrifying. So the way my tryout sort of worked was, it was like 4 separate times, I think a total of, say, like 16 days. So I was brought out with, and they told me up front, like, "We're looking for more referees for Mae Young Classic." So I knew that was sort of the carrot
Yeah.
that I was working towards. They brought me out in, I think it was either June or July, for a whole week. And they just said, we want to see you in a class structure. We want to see you working with the other reps, and we want to give you the full referee experience. And for them, like,
Who
that's
runs
going to the
that?
shows. I don't know who runs it now.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So they had reached out to me partly because Jessica Carr, who's refereeing now on SmackDown, we knew each other from,
She's lovely.
like, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
We knew each other from various, like, talking on Twitter or whatever. So she had given my name as, like, this is another potential female referee. So I came in, and that week DDP was at the Performance Center. And they're just like, we're going to do yoga every day. And I'm like, I am going to nail this, because I've been doing yoga since I was 12.
Okay.
There was actually, like, a push-up contest at one point.
How California of you.
Right. It's like I drink black coffee and I do yoga. Yeah, can you tell? There was like a push-up contest at one point where, like, you do a 5 count down, hold for 5 counts, come back up. And if you, like, fall or delay, like, you're out. And I was like, I got this. And the only people that beat me were Lacey Evans and Shayna Baszler.
Fair.
And I'm like,
enough.
I did okay. I'm okay with this.
Fair enough.
That was the same week that they were filming NXT. So I got to do a dark match before their TV tapings. I also, like, in between commercials and stuff, I got to run out and help talent after matches and whatnot. It was just a really cool experience to see the whole thing and what day in the life of a referee was. And then once I was done with that week, they messaged me and said, we want to bring you in for Mae Young. It's going to be a full week in August. So I go out and I'm just doing the same thing, like, trying to just keep to myself, but be helpful where I can. And they gave me a ton of matches.
Yeah.
And it was
a crazy, like, that schedule was nuts.
That was the first time I met Toni Storm, and I think she had like 4 matches that same day.
I think that was the first time I met. Oh, it wasn't her that got injured then. It was
Tegan Knox.
Tegan Knox. That's right.
I was in that match. That was terrifying.
That was really scary. That was very scary.
Right. Yeah. So that was like, she gets hurt, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know what to do. How are we going to handle this?
Everything stopped down. It was like you could hear a pin drop.
You could. And I'm just trying to, like, focus on her, but at the same time, I don't work here. So, like, what do I need to do to make sure she's as safe as possible? And it was just a whirlwind of, oh God, this is crazy. And I think how I handled that situation had an impact in kind of the other times that I got brought in. I got brought in for a coconut loop. So you do, like, the 3 Florida shows on a weekend where you're driving around, like, Dade City and a couple others. So I did that. I got to do a couple tag matches. They had me do the North American Championship at one point, which was wild.
Yeah.
And then they brought me in for the pay-per-view, and I got to do the Battle Royal, which was super dope.
That's a tall order to go in to do a Battle Royal. That's a lot. What is the worst type of match to referee?
I think the worst ones are, it's funny because it's like, which ones are your husband? I'm kidding. I think the worst ones are the ones that have a lot of different things going on. So where you have, like, a falls count anywhere match, or a falls count anywhere match with multiple teams, because you could have guys over here in the rafters doing something, of Sting jumping off through a bunch of tables, and you've got guys on the ramp doing other stuff. So you're trying to manage everything happening at the same time, but also trying to just make sure that you're still telling the story, that you're still sticking to times, making sure these guys are safe. So I'd say, like, for me, that's sort of the hardest one, just because there's so many different eggs that you're trying to keep in a basket, and they all keep falling out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's very stressful.
The most stressful is blood and guts.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Hands down, because you have 2 referees on the outside. You're trying to give time cues to people that are 20 feet away. It is so structured with every 5 minutes a new person comes out. It's an hour long, so you're tired. And then people get to the top of the cage. You can't talk to them because they're too far away. There's just so many things that you have to manage at the same time that it's so incredibly stressful.
Do you know who's going to be reffing the Iron Man match yet?
The one at Revolution?
That's got to be a tall order right there.
That'll be Bryce. And I know that he's been spending some time on the Stairmaster.
I bet.
Building up the cardio. Yeah.
Holy moly. How do you unwind after reffing matches like that? Like, when you get back to the hotel room, show's over, makeup's off, what do you do?
I call my husband, I tell him about my day, I eat food, and I go to bed. It's super
That's
boring.
very uneventful.
Right. I'm actually a really boring person. Like I like going to bed early. I just want to catch up and whatnot. It's hard because there's a lot of times where we'll do post show stuff like with
Yeah.
pizza and whatnot. And I just have a really hard time just because I am up so early. I'm trying to hit the gym. I'm trying to answer my email. I get to the venue early. There's a full day of stuff. I'm doing 3 or 4 matches a day.
Yeah.
And that wears on you. By the time I get to the hotel, I'm just tired. I just want to go to bed. And that post show adrenaline is so real. And I'm trying to just wind down.
Yeah. It is a lot. It's a lot. I mean, like we said at the very beginning, it's like not only are you reffing these matches, but you have all of these other things to do as well. Sometimes it's nice to just like unplug and like take yourself out of those social situations a little bit
That's
because it's still, you're
basically
still
it.
hanging. It's just still energy output that you just need to like, shut it down.
You're spending all day around hundreds of people. And then by the time you're performing, you're around thousands of people. So there's so much stimulus happening that I'm just dead at the end of the day.
So I didn't know this, but Emilio, my producer, messaged me in the chat of our Zoom here saying that you were known as the Daniel Bryan crying girl.
Oh my God, yes. So
What is this? I don't know what he's talking about.
so Google it.
Okay.
Literally Google Daniel Bryan crying girl. So the day that Bryan retired,
Yeah.
where it was a Raw in Seattle, I was literally sitting at a bar. There's an awesome Mexican place across the street from Climate Pledge, like drinking like a 32-ounce margarita. And I see on Twitter that Bryan's retiring and he's my favorite wrestler. And I'm just like, oh God, like I was not ready for this today. This is terrible. And like they close with the promo. It's a super emotional thing.
Yeah.
So I'm literally crying in the front row. And I paid good money for those tickets. I'm just like, oh God. And at one point I see this camera come up to me and I'm like, oh no, this is happening. You see the red light go on. And I'm like, this is when the floods was starting to happen. So they're about to catch this shit. And I just start crying. And so there's this gif of me just like, which is why like reffing Bryan's matches now is so insane. Especially
Yeah.
I did his one in Seattle that was like literally I sat there, saw your ass retire, and I'm in the ring with you.
How privy were you to knowing that he was coming into AEW?
I had no idea. I was actually backstage in the go position at the end of the show, at All Out, and Bryce comes up to me and says, "Do you know who's here today?" I'm like, "I've heard rumors," and he goes, "He's over there." And I turn and there's Bryan freaking warming up. I'm just like, okay, cool. This is happening. And this is like after Cole had come out. So everyone's already just like on high alert and shit.
That
Oh
was a really crazy day. I was not working for the company yet, so I could just kind of take it all in as a fan, knowing that some of these things were happening. And it was like, oh my God, I still like it's such a goosebumps moment to imagine like Adam Cole coming out, followed by Bryan Danielson. Like, holy shit,
yeah,
top
it was wild.
tier. So cool. What is your relationship with Bryan like now that you've got to spend time with him? You've got to referee his matches. How has it been?
I mean, we're super professional. I would say like we're not like buddy close, but I love working with him. He's a real funny guy. Like he just has like his jokes that he tries to like drive home and tell everybody. He talks about flaccid penises a lot.
What is that? What
I don't
is
know.
that?
I don't know, but it's hilarious. I love it. But there are very few people that are that into wrestling.
Yeah.
Like Dax Harwood is probably the other guy, but that's like literally all Bryan thinks about is wrestling. So when you're working with him, he's thought about every little thing that he's doing. But he's also one of those guys that's really giving, where when he's with an opponent, he's making sure that that opponent has all of their offense in and all of their moves set in. So he's finding ways to really present the best possible match. So working with him is fantastic because I get a new understanding of wrestling psychology. I have an awesome match I can work. And I'm working with a guy who is literally my favorite wrestler when I started watching wrestling.
What a dream.
It's wild.
What a dream. Well, Aubrey, listen, I'm so pumped that I got to have you on here. You're a fascinating human being. It's fun kind of figuring out how you tick and how your inner working all kind of comes together. You do an absolute killer job as a referee in AEW while wearing all these other hats. Yeah, just great to have a little hang with you. Thanks for
It was
coming on the
awesome.
show.
Thanks for being the start of my morning.
Yes.